Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Camila was slowly walking along the streets of her native village. It was a small settlement on the outskirts of the metropolis. Once, as a young girl, Camila dreamed of leaving forever and starting a life in a big city. She saw so many possibilities there, so many ways her own life could go. The village, at some point, fell out of favor with the girl. And at first, everything went according to plan. If it weren't for that chance encounter with Ismail at the ice rink near the shopping center, everything could have turned out very differently. Did Camila regret that fate brought her together with a person who played such a significant role in her life? 6 or 7 years ago, the answer would have been negative, but now Camila finds herself in a tangle of emotions. Everything was going so differently than it should have. Life was falling apart before her eyes, and the young woman could only watch. All her efforts to fix at least something led to nothing. She felt constant guilt, self-pity, and fear for the future. Camila was raised by her mother, Marta Vidal, who worked as a physics teacher at the local school. To make ends meet for herself and her daughter, she had to work double shifts, and then she would bring home notebooks to check tests and homework late into the night. Teachers were not well paid at that time, and Marta had to cut back on everything. But it never occurred to Camila to demand expensive things or pocket money from her mother. She understood how hard it was for her, sympathized with her, and tried to help in every way without causing any distress. Camila's father tragically died when she was just 7 years old, and she didn't know him well. Only vague images from early childhood occasionally appeared in her mind. For instance, Camila still remembered how her kind, strong father lifted her with his big, strong hands, smelling of diesel fuel and gasoline, and gently spined her around the room. Camila laughed joyfully, feeling a sense of happiness. And then it abruptly stopped. Her father worked as a long-haul truck driver but had an accident on the highway. That's how Camila and Marta were left alone. Camila always excelled in her studies, especially in English and literature. She even became a winner in a local competition multiple times, but her mother insisted that she had to focus on the exact sciences. As a physicist, Marta could help her by explaining complex examples and untangling lengthy problems. Gradually, Camila understood the necessary knowledge, although it was difficult. Since childhood, Marta has told her daughter that she should have chosen the profession of an economist. You can work in a bank or in any organization that needs economists and accountants. Where will you go with a literature degree? Like me, become a teacher? No, thank you, you deserve a better fate. Camila didn't argue. She understood the need for a stable, well-paying profession. She studied hard, conquered mathematics and physics, and spent evenings with textbooks instead of hanging out with friends. She knew her mother couldn't afford to pay for her education at a university. So, she had to rely on her own efforts. And Camila succeeded. She got into a university in the big city, on the very faculty she desired, finance and economics. On the day of enrollment, Marta even shed tears of joy. She was so proud of her daughter, happy for her, and, of course, worried as well. After all, Camila was a homebody, quiet, responsible, and even modest. And now she had to live on her own, manage household chores alongside her studies, navigate new acquaintances, and adapt to a new environment. Just be careful with guys for now, Marta advised her grown-up daughter. Focus on your studies and career first, and then all the rest. Of course, Mom, Camila smiled, feeling both nervous and intrigued. The girl understood that a completely different life was about to begin for her. Her mother expected only the best results from her. Camila settled into a one-bedroom apartment. Her mother took out a loan to pay for her daughter's accommodation for a year. Marta didn't want Camila to live in a dormitory. Separate housing seemed like a more reliable option. Besides, no one would distract the girl from her studies. And what about the dorm? It's always crowded and noisy. How can one study in such conditions? Camila appreciated her mother's gesture. She understood how difficult it was for her mother to pay off the loan and provide money for her daughter's life. Marta knew very well that even the largest scholarship wouldn't be enough for a month's living in the city, so she financially assisted Camila. "Mom, as soon as I start making a living, I'll thank you immediately," Camila promised. She really intended to do so. Her mother's support was one of the motivating factors for Camila, and she tried, studied, and delved into the intricacies of science like a hungry bulldog. Camila quickly became one of the top students in her course. For the first 3 years, all she did was study, occasionally allowing herself to go out with friends. There was no time for boys. Camila remembered her mother's advice: first education, then career, and then everything else, although sometimes she looked at her fellow students running off to dates almost with envy. This feeling would sometimes overcome her. Camila also wanted someone to hold her hand gently, to give her flowers, and to look at her with admiration and interest. Her heart longed for something unknown, beautiful, and pleasant. And in general, she wanted to feel not like a strong girl rushing towards success, but as a fragile, delicate one, leaning happily on a strong male shoulder. Camila was a very attractive girl, and she knew it well. She was a tall, slender lady with blue eyes, light blonde hair, and a delicate peach-colored complexion. Of course, guys occasionally paid attention to her. But it wasn't what she wanted. All of them were thin, pimply, and somewhat immature, resembling teenagers. No, Camila needed someone completely different. And one day, the girl went with her friends to the ice rink near the shopping center. The new year was approaching. The students had just passed their tests and exams. Now they had every right to relax. Camila was already looking forward to the trip home to her mom. The girl always enjoyed these visits to her family nest. There, she could temporarily shed the burden of problems and responsibilities and once again feel like a little, beloved little girl. Marta tried her best, preparing Camila's favorite dishes in advance, freeing up time to spend with her daughter, leisurely strolling through the shops, and sitting in cafes. It was a wonderful time for Camila. Being at home was like recharging her batteries and gathering strength for further achievements. It was so nice to know that there was such a cozy, warm place where you were always loved and always awaited. It was a haven of peace in this crazy, fast-paced world. In general, the girls reached the ice rink by evening. It was already dark, and the lanterns around added a touch of magic and mystery to the atmosphere. Camila wasn't good at skating. She hadn't learned it in childhood and stepped onto the ice for the first time this winter. While the girls glided in different directions, dancing to New Year's songs, Camila carefully slid along the sideboards. She needed to know that it could support her, that if anything, she could always reach out and hold on. The place was crowded. There were youth, adults, even elderly people, and many children. It was the children who amazed her the most. Boys and girls were performing amazing tricks on the ice, probably practicing in some sections and occasionally coming to the city rink to showcase their skills and practice. Camila then became captivated by a girl, an incredible girl, a little one, about 7 or 8 years old, dressed in a stylish white jumpsuit, ice rolling like a snowflake, graceful, light, and fast. The girl danced on skates, fully immersed in the process, deriving immense pleasure from the dance. At that very moment, she heard a pleasant, slightly husky voice. "Would you like me to give you a couple of lessons, miss?" "What?" This voice abruptly brought Camila back to reality. She turned around and saw a guy, a young man slightly older than herself, tall and handsome, resembling a character from a youth TV series. He was dressed stylishly and expensively, yet it suited him well. Camila noticed that he wore branded clothes, but it all looked simple and appropriate. Gray eyes looked cheerful, and well-defined lips spread into a friendly smile. Camila noted that this guy had very regular features, sharp cheekbones, a straight nose, a high forehead, and almost perfect proportions. The stranger's face wasn't overly sweet and boyish. No, it was genuine masculine beauty. He could easily work as a model or actor. "I've been watching you for a while," the guy continued, as if nothing was happening, as if he didn't notice Camila staring at him. "It's obvious that you're fairly new to ice rolling. Can I offer some advice?" Camila nodded. You're placing your feet incorrectly. I'm sure I can improve the situation in about 15 minutes. Are you a professional? A coach? No, not at all, the guy smiled. I just came here with friends, like you, to skate. I used to play hockey in my childhood, so I know how to help you. You're making a very common mistake. Camila nodded uncertainly. By the way, my name is Ismael, what's yours? Camila introduced herself. Well, that's great. Camila, don't be afraid of anything. I'll take you to the very center of the rink now, and you won't even notice how you'll learn everything yourself. Camila found Ismael's mention of her name incredibly pleasant. She nodded in agreement, and then he hugged her, not like lovers do, of course, but he put his arm around her waist and firmly held her shoulder, leading her confidently to the center of the rink. Even feeling these touches, Camila's head started spinning. Being close to him, she wasn't scared at all. She stopped being afraid of the ice. It was just some kind of miracle. And now the girl was gliding on the ice, no worse than her friends. By the way, the girls, of course, noticed a handsome guy next to Camila. They didn't approach to avoid disturbing their idol, but from different parts of the rink, they looked at Camila meaningfully and smiled slyly. She already anticipated a multitude of questions from them. The evening ended wonderfully. Ismael offered to drive Camila home. I understand, we've just met. You might be scared. But then I'll just call a taxi for you because you're freezing and you need to get warm soon. Camila smiled. She appreciated such care. And she also hoped that her red nose didn't spoil her appearance. She wanted to look beautiful before Ismael. Camila readily agreed to ride with Ismael in his car, showing her trust and favor towards him. The guy smiled. It was evident that he was pleased. In the young man's car, it was dark and warm, pleasant music was playing, and a refreshing citrus aroma wafted in the air. Camila memorized all the details of that wonderful evening. And then he parked the car near Camila's entrance, covered her hand with his palm, and looked into her face with burning eyes. Ismael gazed at her as if he saw the most beautiful girl on earth, the Queen of Beauty, Miss Universe. No one had ever looked at Camila like that before, and here was such a handsome, stylish, charming guy. Camila even held her breath for a moment. You're a very beautiful girl. Can I kiss you? Camila just nodded. Ismael hugged her and kissed her very gently. They started dating. Ismael was also a student but almost graduated from the technical university. In spring, he was supposed to become a certified specialist. Ismael lived in this city. He had wealthy parents, his father owned a chain of restaurants, and his mother held a high position in the administration. In short, a wealthy family. Ismael already had his own apartment, a spacious studio, stylishly and expensively furnished. Camila had spent the night there many times, and she liked spending time with Ismael in his apartment. The girl imagined as if they were already a family, as if they had been living together for a long time. Ismael was just perfect, huge, smart, and well-read. He traveled a lot around the world with family or friends, visiting various countries. Camila, who had never seen the sea even once in her almost 20 years, listened to these stories eagerly, almost opening her mouth in amazement. It seemed that Ismael liked her attention. They talked a lot, discussed artists, movies, and news, told each other about their childhood, laughed, watched TV, and went to the movies. Ismael showed Camila a completely different life. Before meeting him, the girl only studied, but it turned out that she could combine studying with interesting activities. The world is so big and so diverse. Camila fell in love, truly and for the first time, so she couldn't even imagine her life without Ismael. Perhaps that's why the girl didn't notice the red flags of her beloved, although there were some. However, Camila preferred not to notice them. Firstly, Ismael often went out with friends without Camila, saying they had their own traditions and that they occasionally gathered without their better halves, rested, and talked about men's stuff. Secondly, Ismael was very self-centered. He always put himself first. He got attached to Camila only because she looked at him with adoration and admiration, considering everything he said brilliant. But Camila realized all of this only later, and at that time it seemed to her that she had found the perfect person, someone with whom she could link her destiny without fear, and she seriously intended to spend her whole life with him. Camila didn't even come to her mother during the holidays that year because she didn't want to part with her beloved. Marta was worried, but Camila told her about Ismael. "Well, you're already an adult," wisely noted the wise mother. "Just don't forget about your studies. Okay? Romance is all well and good, but education comes first." And then Camila suddenly realized that she was expecting a child. They, of course, didn't plan an addition to the family yet, but it happened, so what now? Camila understood that she still had a year and a half of studying, and finishing university with a child would be problematic. But others somehow manage it. She wasn't the first, nor would she be the last, after all. Their relationship with Ismael was already stable at that time. At least, that's how it seemed to Camila. They lived together. The honeymoon period was over, everything had settled down, normalized, and even their daily lives were in order. Ismael had defended his diploma and was already working at his father's firm. By the way, Camila still hadn't met his parents. Of course, it would be a little awkward to start communication with the news of pregnancy, but it's okay, it's the 21st century, after all. Camila was nervous before telling Ismael the news. How would he react to this? Camila was waiting for any reaction from her beloved: fear, confusion, surprise. She hoped for Ismael's sincere joy, his support, and his understanding. But he said something that Camila never expected to hear. "Trash," Ismael grimaced, realizing what had happened. "Well, it's nothing. I have a friend at the women's clinic, and he has helped me out several times. He'll take care of it quickly, and he won't leave any records anywhere. So that your future isn't spoiled." "What will he take care of?" Camila didn't understand. Of getting rid of the child, of course. Camila instinctively grabbed her stomach. No, she didn't plan to go for such a thing. Camila already imagined herself as a mother and saw bright pictures of the future. Here she was walking in the park with a stroller, smiling at her baby, and rocking the little bundle of joy in her arms. Apparently, a powerful maternal instinct had kicked in. She had no intention of getting rid of the pregnancy. But Ismael didn't want to see himself as a father at all. He spent a whole week trying to persuade Camila to have an abortion, describing the discouraging prospects of early motherhood and insisting that, as a father, he also had the right to decide. In the end, they had a quarrel. The scandal was loud and ugly. Ismael shouted that he wouldn't accept either her or the child, that she had already become a burden to him, and there was no way he would burden himself with a brat. "I won't have anything to do with you or your child," Ismael assured Camila, his eyes gleaming maliciously. Camila looked at him and couldn't understand. She couldn't comprehend how she hadn't noticed this before. Ismael seemed so rational, so responsible, and so perfect to her, but he was never the person Camila fell in love with. She didn't want to stay with him anymore. Ismael suddenly became repulsive to her, and the girl decisively began to pack her things. "That's right, get lost, and don't ever come near me again, neither you nor your child. I don't want to know anything about you. Fortunately, your wish doesn't matter much here. There's the law, and you are obligated to support the child, at least financially, until they turn 18. Camila felt uncomfortable saying these words. They sounded somehow mercenary, but the girl understood that she would have to raise the baby alone, or rather, with her mother, who would definitely not abandon her daughter in trouble. They were barely making ends meet. No, this child resulted directly from Ismael's involvement. It was Ismael who wasn't careful enough, so Ismael had to support his child. "You've miscalculated here," Ismael sneered, glancing towards Camila. "Don't even hope to get anything from me. You still need to prove that the child is mine." "That's easily done nowadays," Camila shrugged. It was difficult for her to stay cold and indifferent in front of her beloved. Right now, Her illusions were crumbling, her plans and dreams were falling apart, and she realized that life wouldn't be as she envisioned. And even if you do prove it, you won't get anything from me. Do you think you're the only clever one? Do you think you have no predecessors? One such girl showed up when I was still in my 3rd year. She was my classmate. She deliberately got pregnant, thinking she had secured a comfortable life for herself. She didn't want to study or work, she just dreamed of going shopping and sitting in restaurants. She scared me with child support and responsibility too. But my mother brought her down to earth and told her that if anything happened, we would take the child, and she would be kicked out with a push. My mother has such capabilities. You know, she works in the city administration and holds a significant position there? The girl realized that she had no future, so she went for an abortion. So for you to know, there's nothing to catch here. Camila was staring at Ismael. How much malice, how much disgust, how much snobbishness. He considered himself a prince, and she was second-rate to him, a girl for entertainment. Why hadn't Camila noticed this about Ismael before? He seemed noble and good to her. Well, it seemed she didn't understand people at all. Camila realized that getting involved with Ismael and his influential family would cost her dearly. The girl calmly packed her things, promised not to bother Ismael, and even wished him happiness in his personal life. Camila knew, as her inner intuition told her, that the boomerang would return to Ismael. And it was not certain that he would understand why it hit him. That same evening, Camila returned home. Fortunately, there were still tickets available at the bus station to her city. Her mother immediately understood something happened. Instead of bombarding her with questions, she led her to the kitchen, made coffee, and hugged her. Camila told her everything, crying. Finally, she didn't feel stress or any unpleasant emotions. Warmth and light flooded her soul with every tear. Her mother looked at her affectionately, without judgment. She only asked one question. So, what have you decided about the child? I'm going to give birth, of course, Camila answered without hesitation. It's your decision, of course, but you must understand that it won't be easy. I understand. Of course, I'll help you with everything. I'll do everything within my power. Don't worry, we'll get your baby back on track. Everything will be fine. Camila was crying again, this time out of relief. She felt so much better after that conversation with her mother. The future once again shimmered with bright colors. Hope appeared on the horizon. Camila's mother suggested that she should have taken an academic leave from the university. You'll still have plenty of time to study after giving birth, it's just 1 year. It's foolish to drop out of university, it will be harder to catch up later. But what about the baby? Who will take care of him while I finish my studies? And what am I here for? It seems I have to retire, it's about time. But what about money? How will we live? I'll get some students to take up tutoring. I can combine such work with taking care of the baby easily. Besides, there's still a child support, we'll manage, we've been economizing and saving before. Camila brightened up. In all this situation, what scared her the most was the prospect of dropping out of university. So much effort had already been invested in that diploma, and so many hopes were tied to it. But the wise mother found a solution even here. Camila was happy to have such a good and accepting parent who didn't reproach her daughter for the situation she brought upon herself and immediately treated the future granddaughter with love and tenderness, truly a wonderful mother, to say the least. Until her very birth, Camila studied intensively. She no longer sought encounters with Ismael. This person disappeared from her life altogether. However, Camila was immensely happy about her future daughter. When the ultrasound revealed that it was a girl, she breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed easier to raise a daughter without a father than a son. Camila thought at the time that she was very lucky. Estella was born on time. She was a cute, healthy girl with her father's eyes, huge, gray, revealing Ismael's characteristics in the arch of the eyebrows and the curve of the lips. She was a beautiful baby, But Camila wasn't very pleased to see in her daughter the features of the man who treated her so poorly. However, these were minor details compared to the emotions and feelings that overwhelmed Camila. She never imagined that infants could evoke such soul-stirring emotions. Mom was there, teaching her daughter to care for the newborn and rocking her granddaughter at night to let Camila get some rest. And when the academic leave was about to end, it was time for the young mother to return to her studies in the big city, and Marta, as promised, retired. Camila found the last academic year challenging. She longed to go home to her mother and the little baby. Anxieties about Estella haunted her dreams. No, she completely trusted her mother. She knew that she could handle the baby even better than herself, but still, physically, she missed that little warm baby beside her. Sometimes, Camila even cried out that she couldn't speed up time. Only then did the girl realize that all this was precisely for her and Estella's future. Finally, Camila got her diploma. Once, she thought that after this event, she would stay in the big city, find a job here, and never, ever return to the quiet provincial village. There was hardly any work there, salaries were meager, and there were not many places to go out in the evenings. The birth of her daughter changed Camila's perspective and life plans. Now, with all her heart, Camila wanted to return to the village. She even found a job there, working as an accountant at the largest factory. By the way, it was the dean who assisted in her employment, recommending one of the top students to the factory manager. Without this connection, it would have been impossible for Camila to get a job at such a prominent establishment. Camila considered herself very lucky. So they lived like this. Camila worked at the factory, Marta raised little Estella, and she took care of household matters. Everything was peaceful, cozy, warm, and calm. Camila was essentially a single mother, but she realized that she lived easier and more pleasantly than many of her married friends. They rushed home after work, picked up their children from kindergartens and schools on the way, and then they had to cook, clean, and check homework. Camila, living with her mother, was completely free from these worries. The house was always clean, a warm and delicious dinner awaited on the stove, and Estella was fed, bathed, and looked after. Marta, being a former teacher, even helped with Estella's lessons when the time came. Camila would come home after a hard day's work and relax. Well, at most, her mother told her to go for a walk with her daughter. Still, Camila longed for male attention. She was still a very young woman, beautiful, vibrant, and well-groomed, and she attracted attention. At times, Camila allowed herself brief romances, all of which were short-lived. The chosen ones quickly disappointed her. But at least, for a while, she felt beautiful and desired. It was worth it. Estella was entirely under Marta's care, and sometimes Camila even felt like Estella was not her daughter but a younger sister. Perhaps it was not right, but Camila quickly climbed the career ladder, worked a lot, and developed professionally. Initially, this drive was a forced necessity. They needed money to survive. Marta's small pension and the meager child benefit for Estella were not enough to make ends meet. Camila worked hard. Then the woman somehow got a taste for it. She liked the feeling of power, the respect people gave her, and the fact that there were questions and problems that only she could solve. In general, work and occasional brief romances consumed much of Camila's time. Estella didn't lack anything. Camila earned well by village standards and could afford to give her daughter expensive gifts, outfits, fancy toys, colorful books, and beautiful dresses. Camila loved choosing all these things for her daughter. She imagined what would have delighted her in childhood, and she gave those things to her little girl. Estella genuinely rejoiced in new toys and dresses, thanked her mom so warmly, and then Camila felt that she was fulfilling her duty. She was a good mother, but a girl didn't have a father, and someone had to take care of her. Moreover, Estella received an abundance of emotional warmth and attention from her grandmother. Marta has always been an understanding and supportive mother to Camila. But at the same time, she was strict. Camila had responsibilities from childhood. She cleaned the rooms while her mother was at work, went to the store, and even paid utilities for the apartment because her mother was always busy. And of course, from an early age, Camila prepared her school clothes, did laundry, and ironed her own. However, with Estella, Marta clearly melted. Maybe it was the age or pity for the little girl whose father had abandoned her, and her mother was almost always busy. The girl grew up like a young, capricious princess. Marta cooked delicious and nutritious meals for her granddaughter, and the menu was always tailored to the girl's preferences. To grow, a child needs proper nutrition, Marta used to say. The best piece in the house was always reserved for Estella. They bought her sweets, fruits, and delicacies, even when money was tight. And such periods still occasionally happened. Marta spent hours playing with Estella with toys, even when she was tired or had a headache. "Daughter, go and do something in your room," Camila said sometimes. "You see, Grandma wants to go to sleep already. She doesn't feel well today." Estella would pout her chubby lips, her eyes flashing with anger, very similar to the look in Ismael's eyes when he wanted Camila to get rid of the pregnancy. The woman felt uncomfortable under her daughter's gaze. "What?" Marta exclaimed, waving her hands. "I'm happy to play with Estella." And the fun continued. Estella never put her toys away. She could throw things, taken off, right at the doorstep. Marta would scold her with a smile and rearrange everything in its place. Sometimes Camila tried to discipline her daughter, but in the end, she always ended up yelling. She lacked the patience to instill what she considered basic truths into the head of her already grown-up child. "Didn't wash your plate again? I'll serve you lunch in that dirty one." "But I have a lot of plates," Estella countered. "Grandma recently bought me one with princesses. I can use that." "Is it really that hard to wash your plate?" Camila was overwhelmed with irritation. "Until you get used to order, you won't watch TV." At such moments of conflict, Marta inevitably appeared in the room, smoothing things over, calming her daughter and granddaughter, and extinguishing conflicts. Then she started going to school. Estella stubbornly refused to study. It seemed the girl understood things well, but she was lazy. Instead of writing rows of hooks and sticks, she wanted to watch cartoons and preferred walks to boring math tasks. "Mom, she got another C in history," Camila lamented. "In history? It's not like math, which can be hard to understand. You just need to memorize history." "Well, so what if it's AC, it's not AF, and it's fine?" "The girl needs fresh air." She went for a walk with her friends. "What? Are we going to lock her up for her entire childhood now?" Camila just shook her head. She vividly remembered her own childhood. Her mother was much more demanding back then, not only regarding grades, but also appearance and how she spent her free time. "Yes, I was strict back then," Marta admitted when Camila asked her questions. "But now I've become wiser. I realized that children don't need strictness, they need love. Besides, the girl has so few joys in life. You're always at work, hardly ever spending time with her. And the father doesn't want to know anything about the child at all." It was an irrefutable argument. Camila felt that familiar sense of guilt rising from the depths within her. She was to blame for her daughter growing up without a father, for choosing the wrong man to be Estella's parent, or perhaps for behaving in a way that made Ismael not want to stay with them. And her mother was right. Indeed, Camila preferred working and spending time with men rather than dealing with her growing daughter. Camila didn't argue with her mother and temporarily abandoned attempts to re-educate Estella. It was easier for her this way, probably simpler. As Estella grew older, Camila understood more clearly that they would face more problems and worries with this girl. Estella studied poorly, oscillating between CS and FS, and it wasn't due to any lack of intellectual ability but simple laziness and a lack of interest in studying. Thanks to Marta's past work at the school, they kept transferring the girl from class to class, but Marta often found herself embarrassed in the principal's office. He strongly advised being stricter with the careless student. Still, Marta couldn't help feeling sorry for her only granddaughter. It seemed that Estella would become mature, understand the importance of education, and start behaving responsibly. On Marta's part, she helped her granddaughter with homework, explained difficult topics, and even prepared reports for her. Camila could see the enormous effort her mother was putting in to help Estella study so that she wouldn't be held back another year. Camila, in turn, felt her guilt again because she had no desire to deal with all of this herself. If only the problem was poor academic performance. Things were much worse when it came to behavior. When Estella reached her teenage years, she turned into a small, cute monster who was disrespectful and rude to everyone, especially her mother and grandmother. The girl skipped classes, fell into a bad crowd, and was caught stealing from a store a couple of times. Fortunately, Marta's old acquaintance worked as a security guard, so he called her instead of the police. Marta blushed for her granddaughter, apologized profusely to the understanding store employees, and talked with Estella for a long time, understanding deep down that the girl was unlikely to follow her guidance. "Why did you take those candies? You could have asked your mother or me for money. We would have given you some for sweets. Our cupboards are already bursting with all kinds of goodies." Estella remained silent, glancing sideways at her grandmother and mother. Camila was ready to scold the cheeky girl with a belt for such antics, but Marta wouldn't allow it. She believed that Estella would only become more hardened if they treated her harshly. She needed a gentler approach through conversations and persuasion. However, it didn't seem to help. Camila knew why her daughter was stealing. It was some kind of entertainment for her and her group of friends. Estella enjoyed hanging out with kids from what one might call dysfunctional families. Their freedom, independence, and disdain for rules appealed to her. Camila understood this and felt utterly powerless. Her only hope was in her mother. Marta, being an experienced educator, should have been able to find a way to handle the unruly girl, especially because Estella had been with her grandmother since early childhood. They understood each other like no one else. Camila, relieved, shifted the responsibility for raising her daughter to her mother. After all, she was the one earning and supporting the entire family. And, as you must agree, that wasn't a small task. Estella's behavior continued to worsen. Camila was summoned to the principal's office almost every week. She didn't go herself, Marta took on that mission as well. When could Camila deal with such matters? She had immense responsibilities, only she could handle the entire factory's accounting. Everyone Camila complained to about her daughter's behavior assured her that it was normal. "She's a teenager, they all act out," a colleague, raising 2 sons, nonchalantly waved her hand. "She'll grow out of it," another man, with whom Camila spent time, confidently stated. Camila had long given up on serious relationships. She understood that domesticity and having a problematic child were a problem. But for her soul, the woman did engage in affairs, feeling that she hadn't had enough fun in her youth and hadn't gotten enough attention and care from the opposite sex. And she liked, if only temporarily, feeling needed, loved, and delightful. In short, Camila worried about Estella and pitied her mother, but she couldn't change anything. At least, that's how it seemed to her. So Camila went with the flow, hoping that everything would sort itself out. She convinced herself that she earned the money, supported everyone, and therefore had the right to delegate some of her responsibilities to her mother. After all, many grandparents help with their grandchildren. Estella grew up, gained audacity, and became increasingly rude. She started smoking, and that shocked Marta. Camila, to be honest, experienced mixed feelings. Camila herself, at Estella's age, was a quiet, straight-A student who didn't like parties or discos. She used to look at girls sneaking around the corner smoking with some reverence, thinking they were so cool, bold, and strong. And now, her own daughter has become one of them. But these were fleeting thoughts and feelings. Overall, Camila was, of course, concerned about her daughter's behavior, especially with her new group of friends. Among these kids was a boy a couple of years older than Estella, Helio. He grew up in a dysfunctional family. He had a mother who abused alcohol and a bunch of younger siblings. Camila believed that Helio was the instigator of her daughter's terrible behavior. The boy possessed innate charisma and charm and knew how to please adults when he wanted to. But it was he who encouraged friends, including Estella, to engage in bad deeds. He set the tone and was the leader of the group. Despite being a poor student who skipped classes himself, he led his friends into dangerous activities, whether stealing sweets from the store on a dare or jumping in front of cars to frighten drivers. Adults complained about these groups on multiple occasions. Marta and Camila tried to prohibit Estella from hanging out with such friends, but every time the girl made a scene. "What? You don't understand. This is a real friendship. We enjoy being together. With them, at least, I'm not bored. Together, we are powerful." Worst of all, this group harassed quiet, calm kids from school. Sometimes just for fun, sometimes to get their pocket money. Estella and her friends received many complaints. The girl's friends had long been on record. Estella herself was safe from the good relationship between her grandmother, Marta, and the teachers. Once, the older brother of a girl who had been offended by Helio's group ambushed the informal leader in the yard and gave him a good beating. Since then, Helio's friends, including loyal Estella, have started a season of hunting. In the end, they went too far. Estella tackled her classmate, who fell and hit her head. Then there was an ambulance and resuscitation. Fortunately, everything turned out okay. The girl recovered, and there were no serious consequences from the injury. But Estella was also put on record, and Camila's family fell under the scrutiny of Child Protection Services. Now they were regularly checked, like some kind of outcast. Estella was already 15. Camila couldn't handle her. Marta was worried, watching what her granddaughter was turning into. The parenting methods that worked well with her daughter failed with Estella. She responded rudely, often using profanity, to all of her mother's comments. Previously, the threat of losing her pocket money at least had some effect on her, but now the girl wasn't afraid of it anymore. She knew that if necessary, she could always get a significant sum from her mother's or grandmother's wallet, and she did so multiple times. Sometimes she even took things from home, jewelry, gadgets, even dishes and books. Estella was rude to her mother and said hurtful words to Camila, occasionally losing her temper with her grandmother as well, but she was still much more polite with her. Marta was exhausted. Camila suspected that Estella, or rather, her inappropriate behavior, was partly responsible for this. She had repeatedly noticed how detrimental these antics were to her grandmother's well-being. "It's not because of that," Estella retorted. Over the years, she increasingly resembled Ismael. She had the same well-defined facial features, tightly compressed lips, and the same arrogant, self-assured gaze. She was beautiful but unpleasant with her coldness and severity. "It's because of you Grandma feels bad. I was with her while you were working and having fun with men. Do you still think you're better than me? At least I'm with Grandma more often and remind her to take her medicine. And where are you?" Camila choked on such audacity, wanting to ask her daughter if she understood she earned money to buy her trendy clothes, expensive gadgets, and even groceries. But she didn't bother. Estella wouldn't understand anyway. And then Marta had a heart attack. At that moment, she was home alone. Estella was hanging out somewhere with her friends, and Camila stayed late at work, reluctant to return home and see her mother with the worried and sad eyes and her troublesome, scandalous daughter with a pile of problems. Closer to 10 p.m., Camila finally gathered herself. After all, she couldn't spend the night in the office. At that very moment, her daughter called. Seeing Estella's name on the screen, Camila was surprised. Estella rarely called her on her own. "Grandma is gone," she heard the hysterical sobs of the girl. "I came home, and she was lying there." "I'll call an ambulance right away," Camila said, her tongue stumbling. The horror of what her daughter had said gradually reached her, but there was still a glimmer of hope that Estella was mistaken. "What do you think? I am a complete idiot. I called the ambulance myself right away, and then I called you." Estella had indeed made a mistake. By the time the medics arrived, Marta was alive. Camila rushed to her building in a taxi just as her mother was being loaded into the ambulance. Camila went with her. Marta was unconscious, but Camila was still talking to her mother, asking her to hold on and promising that everything would be different now. Camila breathed a sigh of relief when her mother was taken into the ambulance. It seemed like the worst was over. The main thing was that her mother was in the hands of the doctors. Now everything would be fine. The woman hadn't even reached home when she received a call from the hospital and was given the terrible news Marta was gone. They expressed condolences and said they did everything they could. Camila entered her home on wobbly legs. A worried, disheveled Estella rushed towards her. Her face was swollen from crying, and her eyes were red. What happened? Learning about everything, Estella couldn't hold back a furious wail. Why, Grandma? It would be better if it were you. Much better. Her daughter's words at this terrible moment cut into Camila's heart. She was already struggling, and now this. The woman silently walked into her room, locked herself in, buried her face in the pillow, and only then let her emotions flow. Her body was shackling from sobbing, her throat was torn, fear, pain, and despair pressed down like a heavy slab. It seemed that there would be nothing good in life anymore. Gray workdays were passing by. Both Camila and Estella had gotten used to living without Marta, without her care, delicious lunches and dinners, support, loving glances, and warm words. Camila felt that she no longer belonged to herself. All her strength, all her time, and all her resources went to work, maintaining cleanliness in the house, cooking, and, of course, raising her daughter. And with the latter, things were still not great. Camila suspected that Estella's relationship with Helio, a dangerous guy from a troubled family, was far from just friendly. The 15-year-old girl, not thinking about her studies at all, disappeared for whole days, and sometimes nights, with this dubious group of friends. Neither shouts nor pleas nor even blackmail helped. Camila tried to act strictly and decisively. There were times when, leaving for work, she locked her daughter in the apartment, but somehow Estella always managed to get out. Estella was rapidly going downhill, and Camila could only watch, lacking parental authority over her only child. Camila's words meant absolutely nothing to Estella, and the girl often explicitly stated this to her mother, not holding back in her expressions. When I was little, did you need me? You left me with Grandma and rushed to your lovers? And now, what do you want? Respect, love? Well, no, you won't get it. Camila understood that her daughter was partly right. Indeed, she was not at all prepared for the birth of a baby and at some point distanced herself from raising her, relieved to delegate all responsibilities to her mother. Nevertheless, the girl's behavior was becoming increasingly dangerous. It was frightening to see what Estella was turning into. Estella barely passed her exams. She received the school certificate, but dreaming of college was out of the question. And the senior school flatly refused to accept the girl. Camila fully understood the teachers in this case. The woman tried to instill in her daughter the idea that she needed to work. Estella just sneered disdainfully. Stand at the cashier in the supermarket from morning till night for peanuts. Or maybe sweep the trash in the yards. Have you gone crazy? This is not a job for me. With your education, those are the only options. I'll manage without you. Oh, is that so? Camila began to get angry again. Without me, right? Fine. Then find money for food yourself and pay your share of the utilities. Since you're so grown up, take responsibility for yourself. Camila thought that the money blackmail would work, that it would sober up Estella and make her think about the future. However, Estella gave her an unpleasant smile and rushed to her room to pack her things. Understanding what was happening, Camila hurried after her daughter. What are you doing? Wait, you misunderstood me. I understood everything. You reproach me with everything, not for the first time. Great then. I've been planning to run away from you for a long time, as far as possible. Where are you going? Stay, we'll think together about what to do next. We can fix everything, there are options. No way, Estella remained firm. Later, Camila guessed that her daughter had made the decision not in the heat of the argument but much earlier. Estella left home. Camila knew that her daughter lived somewhere in a rented place with Helio. The woman tried to involve the police. After all, Estella was not even 17 yet, while Helio was already an adult. Camila hoped that he would be held accountable, but it turned out that Estella had reached the so-called age of consent and was basically entitled to live wherever she wanted and with whomever she pleased. Camila felt terrible. She turned out to be a bad daughter who nearly killed her mother. If not for Camila and her problems, who knows? Perhaps Marta would still be alive. Camila also revealed herself as a monstrous mother. People raise 3 or 4 children and have wonderful daughters and sons, but Camila, having only one daughter, let her miss out. Camila's heart ached for Estella. How was her girl living? What was she eating? How was she earning money? Wasn't that terrible? Was Helio mistreating her? Periodically, Estella showed up at home, usually when her mother was not around, and took some things, not only her own. Camila, returning from work, noticed traces of Estella's presence in the apartment and quietly rejoiced that her daughter was alive. However, it hurt that Estella chose a time when Camila was at work. Did her daughter hate her so much that she didn't even want to accidentally cross paths with her? Camila had been searching for her daughter. Eventually, she found the shack where Estella lived. It was an old wooden building on the outskirts of the city. Conditions were undoubtedly harsh, and Estella had grown up like a princess. How did it come to be that even such a wretched place was better for her than living with her mother? Sometimes, Camila caught glimpses of Estella from afar without revealing her presence. The girl looked quite happy, and with Helio, they seemed to be a good couple, even though it was difficult to admit. Estella clearly drank a lot, which was evident in her appearance and behavior. Watching her daughter in such a state was very painful, but Camila felt that she lacked the strength to pull the child out of trouble. What could she do? She couldn't force Estella into a clinic, and voluntarily, she would never agree. A year and a half had passed since her daughter left home. Estella had already reached adulthood. This meant that, legally, her mother had no authority over her. Camila had almost not lived during this time. All her thoughts were about her daughter. Acquaintances advised her to let go and forget, saying that if she had decided to live like this, nothing and no one would change her mind. People suggested she focus on herself. But it was easy for them to say. How could she calmly live knowing that her child was destroying herself? The loss of her mother and practically the loss of her daughter, all of this hit Camila with a huge hammer. She did not live, she merely existed. She perceived all the events happening in her life quite indifferently. Only thoughts of Estella triggered her emotions. Perhaps it was during this difficult period that Camila understood how much she loved her daughter. Before, she hadn't even realized it. Now she knew there was no one dearer to her in the world. One day, Camila's boss called her into his office. She thought she had messed up something in the documents again. It hadn't happened before, but now, in such a strange state, she often made mistakes. However, no, they were talking about something else. "You'll go to the neighboring city for training," the director declared. "We'll cover your hotel, your daily expenses, everything." Camila was taken aback. She had never been on business trips, and now suddenly there was such an offer. She didn't want to go anywhere. "Maybe it's better for the younger ones to go?" she timidly suggested. "After all, they need to gain experience. You need it too. So, the day after tomorrow, you're leaving." Remarkably, the trip, which Camila initially disliked, brought temporary relief. It was great to be far away from home, where no one knew you or your sad story. Camila walked past the same shopping center where she had once met Ismael. Again, the city was adorned for the new year, garlands flickering with multicolored lights, illuminated ice sculptures, and decorated Christmas trees. For the first time in many years, Camila caught the general pre-New Year mood. She even felt a desire, for example, to go to a cafe and have a fragrant coffee or stroll through the New Year's sales and buy herself a new dress, just like in the good old days. Unnoticed by herself, Camila walked down the street with a smile. Confidence suddenly appeared. Everything would be fine. Everything would work out. Camila remembered that there was a wonderful cafe nearby. She used to go there with friends when she was a student. She felt like sitting in that place again. Who knew, maybe the same waiters still worked there. In her youth, Camila knew them all by name. The woman went alongside the fence of the regional hospital. Camila looked wistfully at the tall buildings, thinking about the people currently lying in hospital beds. With the new year approaching, some might be discharged, while others would have to celebrate the holiday within institutional walls. Suddenly, Camila felt herself losing balance. The asphalt under the snow was icy, and she needed to walk more carefully, but she had lost her vigilance. Camila realized she was about to fall right onto the ground. She tried to maintain balance, but couldn't. Unexpected help came from an unlikely source. Strong hands gripped her shoulders from behind and brought her back to a stable vertical position. She turned around and met the gaze of a very charming stranger, a man about her age. Not tall, blue-eyed, and with a friendly smile, he might not be described as a handsome man, but he had very pleasant facial features. "Thank you," Camila smiled at him. "You saved me. Pleasure to feel like the savior of a beautiful princess. It's very slippery here. May I escort you?" Camila blinked in surprise. Of course, she understood what was happening. This person was trying to strike up a conversation with her right on the street, just like in the good old days. But this suspicion didn't evoke any rejection or negative feelings. Why not? Camila was in a foreign city, feeling completely different, so. "Yes, please," she kindly nodded. The stranger confidently took her elbow, and they started moving forward. It turned out his name was Salvador, and he was an excellent conversationalist. Fluent speech, a subtle sense of humor, talking to him was a pleasure. Moreover, Salvador looked at Camila in a way that made her feel clever and beautiful again. It was a long-forgotten but pleasant feeling. Camila understood that she had caught Salvador's interest, and she also realized that nothing could happen between them. Who needs a woman with such a tangle of personal problems? Besides, he probably had his share of difficulties. They were both adults, and life was not as simple as it was in their youth, which was a shame. "Can I know where you were rushing to?" Salvador asked. "To a cafe. There's one around the corner. I used to go there when I was a student, so I thought I'd stop by again. I was just curious. I know this one. My classmates and I used to run there between classes. I still go there often, and I wouldn't mind visiting it right now. Will your wife mind that you're going to a cafe with a not-so-well-acquainted woman?" Camila slyly squinted her eyes, making it sound like a joke, but deep down, she was afraid of the answer. She really wanted to hear that Salvador was single. "No, I don't have a wife," the man replied. "We divorced when our son was still little. He's grown up now and lives abroad. So, I'm single." Camila tried to suppress a happy smile. This option suited her perfectly. The cafe had changed a lot. Of course, Camila didn't see any of the old waitstaff there. But it didn't matter. The main thing was that she and Salvador were sitting by the window, sipping coffee with pastries, reminiscing about their student years, and marveling at how much they had in common. They discussed movies, actors, joked, and laughed. Camila even forgot about her problems with her daughter for a while, simply enjoying the conversation, the pleasant atmosphere, and the closeness of this kind and friendly person. The evening was coming to an end, but they didn't want to part. Camila and Salvador were strolling through the festively decorated city. Naturally, they exchanged phone numbers and all their contacts on social media. Camila had a premonition of something pleasant, beautiful, and real, and she was afraid to believe in this miracle, afraid to scare it away. Salvador was absolutely her kind of person. He escorted Camila to the hotel. The next day, they agreed to go to the movies together. In the cinema, he kissed her for the first time. Camila eagerly responded to the kiss. She had been waiting for it since that very evening. And then Camila was about to go home. The business trip came to an end. They called each other several times a day and exchanged many messages on social media, shared news, and supported each other. Then Salvador asked for permission to visit. "Chatting on Messenger is good, but I've missed you so much," Salvador said. Camila felt the same way, and Salvador came. He stayed with Camila. Salvador had a business in a big city, a network of repair and installation companies. He could manage most of his affairs remotely, which turned out to be quite convenient. Camila felt again that she had family. She no longer tried to linger at work, she rushed home immediately to Salvador. He managed to prepare dinner, clean up, and finish his work. So they spent all the evenings together. They walked, watched interesting movies, and had heartfelt conversations. Against all odds, Camila felt happy. She knew that Salvador loved her sincerely and trusted him like no one before. Salvador was wise, kind, and calm. He could easily diffuse any situation with a well-placed joke. This man found the right words for everything and understood Camila very subtly, anticipating her desires and moods. Of course, Camila told him about Estella. Salvador listened attentively, without interrupting. "Well, I wasn't exactly a great father myself. I thought my role was that of a provider. I provided everything for my son, but I didn't give him emotional warmth and attention. That's the result. He doesn't want to talk to me. We haven't quarreled, my son calls and wishes me a happy birthday, but that's about it. So, we're alike in that both of us have experienced parental failure. Your son is at least successful and a well-established person," Camila sighed. "But Estella, I fear for her life, her health, and her future." "Yeah, it's tough for you." Salvador pulled Camila closer and started soothingly stroking her head, shoulders, and back. That was what the woman needed, acceptance and sympathy. Others didn't care about her troubles and advised her to strike her daughter out of her life and not interfere with her self-destructive path. They said she was an adult and that it was too late to raise her. But Salvador accepted, understood, and sympathized with her. Once returning home, Camila found Salvador looking somewhat lost. It was immediately apparent that something was wrong. "Your daughter came by," he informed Camila. "I didn't know she still had keys." "Of course, she does. It's her home, after all." "Right. She was very surprised to see me. Probably she was rude, wasn't she?" Camila could easily imagine how Estella behaved upon seeing Salvador. "She was a little," the man agreed without a hint of offense, "but then we had a heart-to-heart talk." "Really? I couldn't manage that since her teenage years, and she suddenly talked to you?" "She's very hurt, Camila." "Is it because of me?" "Partly because of you, partly because of life, and partly because of a father she doesn't really know. It's not easy for her, she feels so much pain." "I know, it's all my fault." "No, circumstances just unfolded this way, no one is to blame." "Don't console me, I am guilty." "What difference does it make? The main thing is to save the girl. And who's to blame is secondary. How do we save her?" Camila looked at Salvador, hopefully. If Estella opened up to him and started a conversation, maybe everything wasn't so hopeless. "Listen, I talked to her, and she agreed to come to us. She'll come the day after tomorrow." Camila's heart sank at this news, her breath caught, and her eyes darkened. "Are you sure you understood her, right? She'll come when I'm home." "Yes. She agreed to talk with us." Camila prepared for the meeting with her daughter as if it were the most crucial event in her life. She cooked potatoes with meat, it was Estella's favorite dish, and she made a salad. The woman was anxious about how the conversation would go with her grown-up daughter. What comforted her was that Salvador was by her side. He radiated calmness to everyone around him and always knew how to lighten the mood. He deliberately canceled some important meetings to be personally present for the reconciliation between mother and daughter. Salvador often traveled to the big city for work, sometimes for a week, sometimes for several days. Camila missed him, but she understood that her beloved had a lot of business with his companies, and he dedicated every free moment to her. At the appointed time, Estella did not show up. Camila and Salvador were sitting in the living room in front of the set table, waiting for the dear guest who had never arrived. An hour passed, then another. She won't come, Camila sighed tiredly. She deliberately pulls my nerves, angers me, and seeks revenge for my absence in her life. She seemed sincere that night, Salvador said thoughtfully. It's hard to believe she would deliberately do this. Do you want me to go to her? Do you know the address? Camila asked in surprise. I do. She told me when I asked, just in case. Let's go together, Camila suggested. It's probably better if I go alone. We've established some contact, it seems. And you? Who knows how she'll behave after seeing you? I'll go alone. Salvador returned after an hour and a half, visibly agitated, even bewildered. What happened? Camila exhaled. Looking at Salvador, she immediately understood that something had happened. Estella is in trouble. They took her to the police in the city, but what and how is unclear. I couldn't understand this guy, Helio. He was completely drunk. Don't worry, I'll find out more through my connections. Salvador locked himself in the bedroom. Camila sat in the living room in front of the festive table, mechanically poking at the cooled potatoes. Her heart pounded like crazy, trouble with Estella. Camila knew that her daughter's lifestyle wouldn't lead her to anything good, and now the girl was with the police. Well, at least she was alive. Salvador had often said, as long as a person is alive, it's never too late to make amends. About 40 minutes later, he emerged from the bedroom. Well, the charges are serious. They found out Estella was distributing drugs. She was selling them. It looks like that's how your daughter was making a living. Camila shook her head. She remembered that Estella used to say she wouldn't work for pennies as a janitor or cashier in a store and that she would find another way to earn money. And she did. The next day, Salvador went to the city to find out more and possibly find a way to help Estella. Camila was left alone. She couldn't find her place, wandering around the apartment from corner to corner, unable to occupy herself with anything. A feeling of despair clawed at her soul. It seemed Estella was facing a serious sentence. A rebellious thought even crossed her mind. How fortunate it is that her grandmother didn't live to see what happened to her beloved granddaughter. Salvador returned in the evening, looking gloomy and distressed. It's complicated. Estella is facing about 10 years for this. There will be a trial, but no one can help her. There's too much evidence and too many witnesses. I saw Estella. She regrets her actions, and she's very scared. Can I see her? Camila asked. I'll arrange that, Salvador nodded, tomorrow. The next morning, Camila was already sitting in the visiting room, awaiting her daughter. The room itself looked like a roadside cafe or something similar, with plastic chairs and tables and reproductions of famous paintings on the walls. Salvador was by her side, holding Camila's hand and providing support. He asked if his presence might be unnecessary during the conversation, but Camila asked him to stay. She felt more at ease with him. Estella came in. Camila couldn't suppress a sigh at the sight of her daughter, a gray, worn-out tracksuit, greasy hair tied in a messy bun, a bruise on her cheek. Salvador later explained that she got the bruise during her arrest. She had an unhealthy, yellowish skin tone and was painfully thin. If Camila saw someone like her on the street, she would avoid them, not knowing what might be on the mind of this unkempt young woman, clearly abusing alcohol. Hello, Estella smiled apologetically at the visitors. At that moment, she displayed neither her usual insolence nor audacity, only confusion, fear, and hope. I hope that these strong, grown-up people will save her. Hello, sweetheart, Camila barely held back tears, her heart ached with pity. It was challenging to watch her daughter in such a state and in such surroundings. The conversation initially revolved around practical matters, what Estella ate, whether she was mistreated, and how she felt here. Then Camila asked the question that had been tormenting her since she learned about Estella's whereabouts. Why? Why did you do this? Didn't you understand what all this could lead to? Salvador put a warning hand on her shoulder, but it was too late. Camila didn't expect such a reaction from her daughter. Estella's eyes flared with a malicious fire, her hands involuntarily clenched into fists, and she looked at her mother as if she were an enemy, detestable and unpleasant. "It's all because of you," Estella muttered. "I hate you. I'm here because of you." "Why?" Camila blinked in confusion. She regretted her careless question almost immediately. Salvador had warned her. He said Estella was in an agitated state and needed to be handled delicately. "You ruined my entire life with your indifference. Because of you, I barely studied, and now I'm in jail. I tried to convey to you that education. That's right, and I did everything to spite you. Out of hatred, out of revenge. Tell me, please, where was I supposed to get the money? So, I got involved in all this. You pushed me to this, you." Camila remained silent, unable to find the right words. Estella continued to pour buckets of mud on her. Salvador approached the enraged girl and hugged her tightly. Estella unexpectedly buried her face in his shoulder, nearly a stranger, and burst into tears. When Camila attempted to place her hand on her daughter's shoulder, she angrily shrugged off Camila's hand. Salvador silently gestured for Camila to leave the room. Salvador spent another 15 minutes with Estella. Camila guessed that he was gently and unobtrusively trying to ease the situation and reconcile the daughter with the mother. She didn't know if Salvador would call her to Estella right now or if her daughter had calmed down and was ready to talk to her. Camila asked herself whether she could overcome her feelings and communicate with Estella as if nothing had happened. On one hand, Estella was a poor, tangled-up girl who needed maternal warmth. On the other hand, she was already an adult and should have understood basic things. Camila was hurt. She clearly didn't deserve such treatment, such hurtful words, and such accusations. When Salvador came out, he mentioned that Estella still didn't want to see or hear her mother, so they headed home. Camila was left to guess the extent of the unpleasant things Salvador had said about her daughter. Then it was the day of the trial. Camila and Salvador attended the hearing, and Estella was sitting in the defendant's seat. She deliberately avoided making eye contact with her mother. When the verdict was announced, Camila screamed. 10 years! That was more than half of what Estella had already lived. Soon after, the girl was sent to a high-security prison located in another region. Camila tried to meet with her daughter before her departure, but she found out that Estella's mother had put her on a blacklist, naming her among those she didn't want to see. Salvador came for the meeting with Estella, and she didn't refuse to communicate with him. He conveyed to her some items from the list: clothes, soap, and a towel. Days turned into weeks. If Salvador hadn't been there during this difficult period, Camila might have gone mad from worry about her daughter. They officially got married without lavish celebrations, crowds of guests, or a restaurant. What was the point of all that in such a situation? Salvador was always there, except for those times when he had to leave for the city on business. His business demanded attention. Sometimes Salvador was absent for weeks, and there were times when he went on long business trips. During those times, Camila missed him to the point of heartache. They communicated, of course, over the phone and through messaging apps, but she missed his warm hands, strong embraces, and tender glances. Occasionally, Salvador and Camila went to the small gray town where the prison was located, bringing gifts, clothes, and books for Estella. However, only Salvador went for the visit. Estella still didn't want to see her mother. No matter how hard Salvador tried, he couldn't persuade the girl. He conveyed Estella's words to Camila with the softest expressions, but she, of course, sensed what her daughter truly said. It was painful, but people adapt to everything. So did Camila, who got used to her own child hating her and blaming her for all her misfortunes. Partially, of course, Estella was right, but only partially. Camila fervently hoped that with time, her daughter would cool down, reconsider the whole situation, and they would finally have a calm conversation. Several years passed. On the surface, nothing seemed to change, but Salvador became increasingly somber. He lost almost all his appetite and weight. Camila tried her best, preparing dishes her husband loved. Salvador seemed to appreciate it. He thanked her, but hardly touched his plate. Something happened at work? Camila tried to get an answer. I can see that something is wrong with you. It did, Salvador nodded, embracing his beloved shoulders. Don't worry, everything will be fine, it's just a tough period. And Camila breathed a sigh of relief. She believed Salvador unconditionally. If her husband said everything would be fine, then it would be. One night, Camila woke up to find Salvador walking in the corridor and talking on the phone. Something was wrong, and Estela immediately came to mind for some reason. The worried woman rushed into the corridor and was stunned. Her husband was pale, almost blending with the white wallpaper, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, and dark circles appearing under his eyes. He was unwell, very unwell. Salvador was calling an ambulance, summoning doctors to himself. Worry for her beloved tightened Camila's heart with an icy hand. What's happening to you? The illness is back, Salvador replied unclearly. I thought I had beaten it, but no. What illness? Right now. Salvador's face twisted in pain. He clearly couldn't explain anything in such a state to his wife. Helplessly, he sank into the armchair. Not knowing how to help her beloved, Camila offered him water and put a damp cloth on his forehead. He gratefully nodded but couldn't speak. Eventually, Salvador blacked out, almost pushing Camila into hysteria. Fortunately, the ambulance arrived quickly. Salvador was taken to the hospital, and, of course, Camila went with him. In the ambulance, her husband's condition worsened, and the medics were bustling around. It was a terrifying moment, but they still managed to get Salvador to the hospital. Camila felt as if she were reliving events from many years ago. She had once ridden in the ambulance with her mother and had also breathed a sigh of relief when they handed her over to the doctors. It seemed like now things would get better, and then. That was why this time the tension didn't leave Camila. She tried to push away dark thoughts, but they persistently circled in her head. Intuition told her that nothing would be good anymore, everything was over. They told Camila to go home. She tried to get information from the medical staff about her husband's condition, but no one said anything. The attending doctor will come in the morning, and then you will learn everything. There's no need for you to be here now. And in the morning, they called Camila. She hadn't slept, of course, so she answered immediately, and again she heard the terrible news: they couldn't save Salvador. The following days dragged on like a fog. A conversation with the doctor clarified a lot. It turned out that Salvador had been suffering from cancer for many years. The fight against the disease had varying success. Sometimes Salvador won, sometimes the illness did. He didn't go on business trips. Periodically, he had to undergo treatment in the hospital. And Camila didn't know anything about it. She understood Salvador, of course. He didn't want her to worry about him. And Camila, consumed by her own problems and worries, didn't even notice what was happening to her beloved husband, and he protected her from fear, anxiety, and worry because he understood how difficult it was for her. Then there was a meeting with the notary. The woman found Camila herself. She simply knocked on the door, and Camila opened it. At that time, many people used to visit her, Salvador's friends and colleagues, her own friends, neighbors, expressing condolences and offering help. It turned out that, despite Salvador's hope for a favorable outcome, he had prepared for the worst in advance and transferred a significant part of his estate to Camila. The widow became the heiress of 2 apartments in the city, Salvador's car, and a substantial bank account. The businessman bequeathed the business to his son, who lived abroad and showed no interest in his father's affairs. He would be surprised when he received the notification. Camila burst into tears. How could it be? Her beloved was unwell and scared, yet he cared for her. Then came the funeral, a dreadful, long day. The farewell was organized in the big city, not in the village, because Salvador's friends, relatives, and colleagues lived there. Camila herself didn't understand how she endured it all. Luckily, she received help organizing the farewell from an agency, otherwise, she would have surely forgotten or confused something. She couldn't find the strength to stay at the memorial service. She felt unwell. One of Salvador's friends offered to take her home. Camila was grateful for that. After all, it wasn't a short drive, it was a neighboring city. On wobbly legs, the woman made it to her floor, and then it turned out that the keys weren't in her purse. She must have dropped them somewhere in the commotion. The day was difficult and heavy. Was she really concerned about the keys now? She was slowly and painfully realizing what had happened. Camila still didn't want to believe that Salvador was no longer there. Why did fate treat her like this? It gave her a few years of happiness, made her believe that she had finally found her person, and then took it all away. It was too cruel. There was nothing to be done. She had to go home. She wanted to go to bed as soon as possible and let the tears flow. Camila went down to her neighbor. She always had a spare set just in case. Well, here was a case when it was needed. When Camila climbed back to her floor, she noticed that the door wasn't even locked. Apparently, in the morning, she was so excited that she didn't even lock it. Camila pushed the door open, entered the half-darkness of her apartment, and gasped in surprise. She thought she couldn't experience any emotions that day, but now she felt fear. Someone was here. Someone sensed her arrival and froze there, in the far bedroom, listening. Who was here? Did someone take advantage of the open door? No, that was impossible, of course. They say that the deceased sometimes come to say goodbye. It was a foolish, superstitious, and silly thought, but Camila clung to it like a drowning person to a straw. Without thinking that there might be an intruder in the room, she headed towards the bedroom without even taking off her shoes. Is it you? Camila couldn't believe her eyes. Estella was looking straight at her. Her daughter looked much better than the last time they saw each other in the meeting room. She was now well-groomed, neatly dressed, and fresh, with clear eyes and even a light, tender blush on her cheeks. Was this really Estella? It's me, the girl nodded. But what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in prison. They reduced my sentence for good behavior, and Salvador also helped. After all, he used to visit me often. Sometimes, as far as I know, he came with you, but sometimes alone. We talked a lot. He helped me understand many things and think about my life. I learned how hard it was for you. I realized I was wrong, but I still didn't want to see you. I was ashamed of myself and of my behavior. It seemed like you would never forgive me for everything. He said you would forgive and accept, but I wasn't ready. Of course, I'll forgive, exclaimed Camila. I forgave you a long time ago. I made many mistakes myself. Everyone makes mistakes, Estella smiled. There's no manual for dealing with children in the maternity ward, so people act through trial and error. Now I know that for sure. What do you mean? Mom, I have a daughter, Agata. I named her after Salvador's grandmother, by the way. He told me a lot about her. She was a good person. A daughter? Agata? Yes. My pregnancy was another factor in favor of early release. Why? Why didn't you tell me anything? And Salvador, too, just kept saying everything would be fine with you. He persuaded me to come to you. But I couldn't, it was too embarrassing. I knew it would happen eventually, but it was too hard to overcome myself. I was a fool, I know. Salvador gently prepared me for this. He nudged me but didn't pressure me. He was really kind. So where have you been all this time with Agata? In Salvador's apartment. One of those now belongs to you. He helped with money and even paid for my online graphic design courses. You remember, I always drew well. He said that turned this hobby into a profession, and indeed, I'm already earning money while on maternity leave. It's so great. It doesn't fit in my head. I know, Mom. Estella's voice and gaze were filled with sympathy. I know you're going through a very tough time right now. You lost Salvador, and I can't get used to it either. He did so much good for me. He was like a grandmother or father I never had. I don't know how to explain. I understand, sweetheart. I understand everything. But how did you end up here? And why? Did you decide to talk to me after all? Not entirely. Estella lowered her gaze. I thought I wasn't ready yet, but now I'm even glad it turned out this way. Estella explained that she also attended Salvador's funeral today. She hired a nanny for Agata for the whole day. She couldn't just let the person who did so much for her and her daughter go without saying goodbye. Estella saw her mother and kept her distance. It wasn't difficult. Camila was in such a state that she didn't notice anything around her. Estella seized the moment when Camila's bag was lying on the dining room windowsill. She reached in and grabbed the keys. She needed to get into the apartment at all costs, preferably while her mother was away. By Estella's estimate, the funeral would last at least a couple of hours. At that time, she could take what belonged to her and disappear. She would talk to her mother later, when her mother was ready. Estella hoped that she would become successful and independent, start earning well, and then she wouldn't be ashamed to return home and ask her mother for forgiveness. So, what did you come here to take? Camila inquired. What was happening resembled a strange dream or a movie, one of those they say doesn't happen in real life. I knew about everything. I knew that Salvador was very ill. He told me. He also said that when he's gone, I should take something from the model of the ship in your bedroom. He left something there for me and Agata so that we wouldn't need anything until I got back on my feet and started earning well. What is there? Did you find it? No, I don't see any ships. There it is. Camila pointed to the cabinet, on the top shelf of which sat the ship model. Estella hadn't noticed it, as a stack of books obscured the view of the assembled model. Carefully, she took the toy, turned it in her hands, then guessed, opened the door on the deck, reached into the hold, and pulled out an envelope. There was a will. Estella became the heir to one of Salvador's bank accounts. There was an amount that would be enough for several years of a carefree life. And also, there was a letter in the envelope. Estella unfolded it and began reading aloud. Hello, little one. If you're reading this letter, it means I'm no longer here, and there's no one to remind you that the most important and precious thing you have in this life is your mother and daughter, of course. Mother and daughter. It's the real happiness that you have with each other. Appreciate it. Together, it's easier, more enjoyable, and more fun. Together, you are a tremendous force. I deliberately left the will here, in the apartment. I knew you wouldn't find this message quickly. I really hope you stayed until Camila arrived, and now you're together. Mother and daughter exchanged glances. It was strange and very pleasant. Salvador seemed to be invisibly present in this room, watching them and smiling. Everything turned out just as he had planned. Mother and daughter finally met. If Camila isn't here yet, but you've already found the envelope, well, just wait for her. Both of you need it. Tell your mom I love her very much. I am grateful to fate for our chance meeting. Camila made my life brighter, more pleasant, and warmer, and let her forgive me for hiding my illness from her. I just didn't want to worry her. Well, and I hoped that everything would be okay. Camila felt tears streaming down her face. Salvador seemed so close, yet impossibly far away. Even after his death, he managed to do a tremendous act of kindness. How did he manage all this? Estella silently approached her mother and hugged her. Would you have waited for me? Asked Camila. Would you have waited if you had found this ship before I arrived? Of course, Estella nodded. Salvador asked me to. Mom, let's go to my place. You must see Agata. By the way, she looks a lot like you.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.